Hi guys, I am Rainanne Abalos, together with my partner Xanz Portullano, and we are going to tackle about the normative architecture of reality towards an object-oriented ethics by Justin Harmon. First is the introduction. What is living and what is dead in speculative realism, where math indicates the self-counseling background from and against which every explicit self-presentation, practical or theoretical, is deployed, and where philosophy points to one singular opening of or space of access to truth. If, however, the unity of philosophy is always preserved in the multiplicity of philosophies, then philosophy is not identical to truth, not even the truest philosophy, but is only ever one contingent and historical expression and rigorization of the truth. And next is the normative question. At the most abstract level, the questions being asked in normativity are whence norms, from where does the ought issue, why ought we recognize it. It is, in other words, the mathematical question as such. To respond to this question can be understood as a more rigorous, nuanced, and far-reaching formulation of an answer to be more or less intuitive among secular non-philosophers, for whom cultural relativism is unpalatable. Why is it wrong to swindle Miss Swanson out of her social security check? Because she is the sort of being that demands not to be swindled. Another, why is it wrong to kick the stray moth in the alley? Because it is the sort of being that demands not to be kicked. Next is the realist view, the logical absolutism. The absence of transcendental, universal measure does not entail the absence of the measure. And according to Harmon's realist view, if there is no God, then nothing is simply permitted. Next is the mathematical account. There is two Next is the mathematical account. In mathematical account, there are two absolutism, which are the objective absolutism and subjective absolutism, and both aim to close the space of questioning. Axiology is a value theory answer the normative question, severing it theoretically from the categories in which we have historically endeavored to investigate the real. Next is the object-oriented ethics. It is rather a strategy to recover the sense of the ethical prior to its ossification in the ideal domain of values, housed in one or another structure of privileged subjectivity. My project is not to reduce human, purportedly the only moral agents in the cosmos, to the level of mere things. Rather, it is to elevate the plurality of supposedly mere thing to a level of dignity and considerability, therefore reserved for only gods and humans. But, crucially, it is also an acknowledgement that we cannot and ought not, even if we could, reverse the decisive blow that critical philosophy has dealt to all dogmatic realisms. We can't return to some bucolic state, the proto-ethical issues from the singular existence of every being in its peculiar style of being. This style exercises itself, this being speaks, as called imperative lateral and never unilateral. Appropriation demand. My project is not to reduce human beings, purportedly the only moral agents in the cosmos, to the level of mere. Rather, it is to elevate the plurality of supposedly mere things to a level of dignity and considerability. Therefore, reserved for only gods and humans. Next is the speculative relativism. There is two parts in speculative relativism, and those are the correlation. And in speculative relativism, there is correlationism. And according to Melasocks, the idea according to which we only ever have access to the correlation between thinking and being, and never to either term considered apart from the other. And according to Harmon, philosophy of access, which assumes that the human world gap is the privileged site of all rigorous philosophy. Humanity's limitedness determines both the complexity of any transcendence of this intelligibility is barred by the world and its insurmountable limits.
Hello, I'm Xanz Portullano, and to continue, the speculative turn. In the face of looming ecological catastrophe and the increasing infiltration of technology into the everyday world, including our own bodies, it is not clear that the anti-realist position is equipped to face up to those developments. As Milasaw states, against dogmatism, it is important that we uphold the refusal of every metaphysical absolute. For example, but every ontological absolute. But against the recent violence of various fanaticisms, it is important that we rediscover in thought medical of absoluteness. Any case, to counter the pretensions of those who would present themselves as privileged trustees solely by virtue of some revelation. And as for Harman, the qualitative features of a thing revealed its nature and reality more than its quantitative features. In the real colors and resonance and warmth, we perceive the consistency of a real thing. Next, Bruno Latzer's actor network theory, or the theory of irreductionism. Both Harman and Bryant leverage Latour's reductionism in the development of what they call a flat ontology. Although, as we shall see, Harman rejects the implication that the being of an entity is at all reducible to its effects on other entities. The effort to reduce one level of reality to another invariably leaves residues of the reduced entity that are not fully translatable by the reduction. Another aim of the pursuit of an irreductive flat ontology is the neutralization of all metaphysical hierarchies. Next, Manuel de Lana argues, while an ontology based on relations between general types and particular instances is hierarchical, each level representing a different ontological category, like organisms, species, and genera. An approach in terms of interacting parts and emergence wholes leads to a flat ontology, one made of unique singular individuals differing in spatio-temporal scale but not ontological status. The structure of the continuum of being is specular. In mereology, there is no single given part or emergent, and every part is also a whole. The emergence or self-presentation of new wholes is simultaneously metaphysically and epistemically limitless. For better understanding, Harman doesn't agree that an entity is at all reducible to its effects on either entities. Also, grant what phenomena cannot be reduced to how they appear for any given apparatuses of reception, technological or biological. Next, object-oriented ontology. Harmon is the only object-oriented ontology philosopher, where he stated individual entities of various different scales are the ultimate stuff of the cosmos. Objects cannot be reduced to anything else, but must be addressed by philosophy on their own terms, which there are two broad paths in his philosophy, which is the undermining, or where it means objects are too superficial to be true, and another is overmining. Objects are declared too falsely deep to be true. For harm, every object is an irreducible unified whole, is ultimately a constellation of four elements, which are the real object or the unified autonomous whole. Next is real properties, or essentially constitutive of the object but are concealed behind superficial appearances. Next is the sensual object, or object may or may be not visible, and sensual properties, various properties that one can enumerate or theoretically abstract. Harman observes that every phenomenon, even if necessarily taken up abruptly by way of disparate profiles, is perceived as a unified whole. So next, Heidegger's being and time. Such entities are not objects for knowing the world theoretically. They are simply what gets used and so forth. We tend to consider only the in order to for which the hammer is deployed, that is, the end result of the task at hand. When circumspectly engaged, we navigate a kind of hermeneutic circle. The hammer makes sense only if we understand nails, boards, houses, etc., which only makes sense if we understand that for the sake of which we are engaged. The latter can be understood only to the extent that we know the tools at hand through just the sort of circumspective involvement under the discussion, which is stated here. Heidegger calls these entities equipment or Zog or tools encountered most primarily as ready-to-hand Zohanden, withdrawal from self-consciousness, reflection. In use, the hammer is transparent. We don't look at it in disinterestedly. Also, Graham stated that holds that excess is essential because there is an essential feature of entities that is excessive. According to Wolfendale, that is what Graham, stated. This move, he goes on, converts the essential excessive into an excessive essence. Moreover, Harman stated that rather than overthrowing Kant in favor of some form of absolute knowledge, what we need is to spread the Kantian vision across the cosmos as a whole. For what Kant actually gave us was not a poignant theory of the special limitations of poor human beings. Instead, he gave us a nominal or phenomenal distinction that holds for all relations whatsoever, and Vogel articulates that the setting of a limit, drawing of a line, does in itself entail and postulate knowledge about what is to be found on both sides of the line. In other words, there is a hidden contradiction in the conscious setting of final limits within the realm of knowledge. Because setting a limit between what we can know and what we cannot know necessarily entails some form of knowledge about what is at both sides of that limit. Human beings are perpetually in a state of knowing and not knowing due to their limited nature. Consistent with this Socratic insight, one cannot determine the parameters of the difference between knowing and not knowing without committing to learning more about. One can never hope to fully understand something they don't know already. So next, moving on, the theory of vicarious causation. If contact in the realm of the real is utterly impossible, but contact in the sensual realm is an absolute requirement, then obviously the sensual realm of experience must be where all causation is triggered. The real objects that withdraw from all contact must somehow be translated into the sensual caricatures of themselves. And these exaggerated profiles are what must serve as fuel for the causal relations that are impossible between concealed things. Somehow, the events that occur in the central sphere must be capable of retroactive effect on the reality that lies outside all experience. The real things in Harman's world are concealed behind continuous sensual facades in a constant state of mutual withdrawal. From Ernie Bank to Ernie on Sesame Street, every object, perceptual or conceptual, is simultaneously real and sensual. While sensual objects never interact with real objects, they are ultimately nothing more than the results of interaction or reality as for some. And guerrilla metaphysics. When we discuss volcanoes, there is some real entity out there in the world to which the name volcano refers. If we try to determine just what this volcano is for Whitehead, it turns out to be nothing more than its perception of other entities. These entities, in turn, are made of still further perceptions. And for the conclusions, which are stated here, is very disappointing because its implications or lack of thereof for ethics and political philosophy. How exactly is one to take seriously the very real objects that constitute the socio-political landscape? We typically call such objects persons if these objects never touch, interact, or show themselves. It is not sufficient to point out that such interactions do take place, but at the phenomenal level of sensual objects and other properties, because, and this must be kept in mind, Harmon is purportedly offering us a robust theory of metaphysical realism, a theory, in other words, which at last fulfills Husserl's promise of returning to the things themselves. And that would be all. Thank you.